let's talk about the interview experiences of the three of you. This would be a little detailed segment, and a lot of my audience also are people who want to, let's say, get into these fields and understand the interview experiences. Devyansh and Karthike, both of you also hire at your firm, like you also take interviews. So it'll be good to understand from your perspective also how do you conduct interviews. But before that, I would love to understand what kind of interview questions you were asked, how did you prepare for them, what resources you used when you gave the interviews, and all of that. So maybe one by one we can go.
Can you start?
Yeah, I think all of us can probably add on our interview experiences. While I think for me, I think two things. One, I had corporate finance experience from Deutsche, so plus with a CA CFA background, I think that helped with the core financial concepts. And second thing is, yeah, the BCG recruitment experience when you practice for a month for your case interviews. I think that also gave me an advantage. I think similar for that'll be the case for all three of us.
Yeah.
So I think my prep essentially was just to go, at least for when I was interviewing for private equity roles, I think it was just to go back and revise what I did earlier, what I was doing right, what I was not doing wrong, and just fix those. So I think for anyone, I think the advice that I would give for anyone, what to take from it is basically have the basics, the three statement financials, having an understanding of that. If there's one thing that's changing on one statement, what is the contra effect on the other? Just having that very clear. Uh, Understanding just the basic sense of what you're applying for. So it's an investing role. So just understanding cash flows, DCF, all of that could be important. While these are not make or break, it always gives you an edge if you have an understanding, and if you're not from a commerce background. If you're a CA, definitely understand concepts to the T. But if you're coming from an engineering background, understanding the basics is important. I think beyond that, there are enough resources available online on Corporate Finance Institute. Just Google definitions of basic terms you are coming across and getting a grip over it. Now, that's the easier thing to do. The tougher thing to do is practicing your case interviews. And why case interviews are important is basically they convey to the interviewer how you think. And structured thinking is very important in the kind of roles that we are all in. And that's where case interviews help. Basically, any problem statement that you are given, you need to take a step back and break it into two or three problems, and then come to a solution for those two or three problems. For each of those problems, you need to think of the universe of factors and summarize into two or three factors that you would want to discuss in the interview. So let's say there's a problem statement of, let's say, basic profits are down. So then profits are down, then you'll have to go up to what is profit made of. I'm doing a very basic thing. This is not, it won't be as simple, but it's like the profits are made of revenue.
I became happy. इतना simple है तो मैं भी apply कर लेता हूँ.
Yeah, it like profits are made of revenues and costs. Then you discuss both. Different businesses have different streams of revenue. What are the different streams of revenue? You ask the right questions to get to the right answers. I think that's very important to, again, step back, structurally think, then ask the right questions, and then navigate to the right answer. And then every interview adds a flavor, whether they want to test more on the qualitative aspect or the quantitative aspect, the technical aspect, and then some would want to see if you can get creative around it. Some may just want to say, even if you're giving the right answer, they might just want to tell you that you're giving the wrong answer just to see whether you can manage stress. They also, while in a technical interview also, they can test you on your HR, on your communication skills, whether you would be, I think the other important point that I would like to highlight is these are very small shops. So being a nice person and a likable person is actually very important. Some may think that we are not coders, we're not into coders or algo or quant where if I'm just 10 on 10 on IQ, I'll get hired. It's not that, because it's a very local business in a small shop, and relationships matter a lot because you'll be interacting with your management, with your multiple advisors, bankers. I think with board directors, I think it's very important that you have your EQs up there where you can be trusted with sensitive information and relationships. So it's very important to be a team player, because it's never a one-man show over here in these shops. So I think that's also one thing that these people test you on. I think you guys should definitely.
How many rounds of interview had you given at Blackstone?
I had given 9 interviews.
9 rounds of interviews, and
I think the idea is to basically meet because we are small shops, and it's at least to meet the entire senior team,
Got it.
so that everyone likes and everyone says that yeah, we'd be happy to work with
Wow.
her or him. Yeah,
And what, like 30 minutes per interview, I assume?
45 minutes to 1 hour
Per interview.
Per interview.
My God, when do you grill or? I mean, 9 hours of interview.
I mean, grilling is not the right word. It does get exhausting. Like I'll be very honest. I was popping a croissant after. If I mean, it depends. I mean, that happened in BCG as well, because we had like 5 interviews in a day,
Yeah.
and these are, you have to give your best, right? You have to be consistent. That's the secret. That
Yeah.
every interview you have to be very consistently at your best. One bad interview and it's like Hunger Games.
Yeah.
So I think it does get stressful, and the multiple coffees and
So all these 9 what happened over how many days?
3 days, 3 or 4 days.
Oh, 3 days, 9 interviews.
Yeah.
My God. And all of this were in
So I think
person?
the funny thing is that you are applying for, I think all of us applying for multiple PE firms at the same time in the same 2-week window.
Okay.
So per day can go up to 8-9 interviews as well,
My
with different
God.
funds.
Funds,
Yeah.
Got it. And was this online for you or offline?
So I was recruiting around from right at the advent of COVID. This was May 2020. So yeah, this is all virtual for me, but
Okay.
I think it's a mix of virtual and in person these days for all of us. If you're in Bombay, we might just call you over. If you're traveling, we might just do it all virtually. We might just say, at least for the final interview, just come over. So it's a mix
Yeah.
for all of us.
Which was the most difficult round out of all these 9?
I mean, there's no it's completely dependent on how comfortable you're with the case. So it's not the person, it's the case topic.
Every round is not a case interview, I assume.
I think every round has some case element, or at least some technical element. Yeah.
So, like, is it like a guesstimate which you are asked, like estimate the number of Uber rides in a day?
I think that happens more in consulting.
Consulting.
Yeah, but not in investing.
So, what kind of case? So, like, I'm trying to understand. So, these cases, when you mean, so are these, you have to prepare models, you have to present the deck, or what kind of cases?
I think some funds do have a modeling round, but not us. I think, like I said, it's more of a mix of financial and qualitative aspect of it's finance and strategy is how I would like to say. It's basically, so a business has a problem and you have to fix the problem.
Got it. Fair.
So that is, if a business has to take a decision, there's, let's say, simple fixed cost modeling or variable cost modeling, like what to opt for, capital budgeting decisions, whether you buy or rent a house, what's the best way. Then they'll throw you some numbers at you, and then they see how you will decide whether to buy or rent.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
that's the kind of
Good.
yeah.
I think similar to his experience, like I also had 9 interviews and I had a financial modeling round as well, so we can speak about that. But when it comes to interviews, at least the way he segmented, every interview has 2 parts, financial and strategy/commercial. So when it comes to your prep or what interviews look for, say if you are coming from a finance background, then as an interviewer expect you to be very good at finance part. Maybe commercial, I'll think, okay, you can learn on commercial, but finance has to be strong. Similarly, if you're coming from a consulting background, then commercial you have to be very strong. Maybe financial, I'll take a view that you can learn.
What
But-
exactly is commercial?
So commercial is more about what he talked about, strategy and case perspective, but how commercial would be around how do you think of investment thesis? Is this an is this an attractive opportunity? So it will come to that D level evaluation. But how, just talking about commercial a little bit, for you as in when you are preparing for interviews, I think what matters there is, A, they will test you on what you have written in your resume, and second is out of the box creative, something you have no idea about, and push you, give you an industry example where you have no idea about. But in the initial round of interviews, usually they try to stick to your resume to understand what you have written, is it true? The lens that you have to apply, and I'm talking about my personal example which I applied, was that when you are, say I've worked on a case in, say, vehicle finance industry, right? Then when you're preparing for a private equity interview, you have to take a lens, okay, it's now you need to know about the industry. If I'm asked, would I invest in this industry, then you need to think, these are the reasons I would invest, these are the reasons I would not invest. If within this industry, if this is the industry I worked on, which are the key players that I know of in the industry, and why do I think one is better versus the other? So this is another lens you have to apply when you're preparing for a PE interview, because at the end of the day you have to make investment decisions. So that thinking is very important. So what I would say is when you are writing that resume, each line or case that you have written or everything, or even if you're in finance job, whatever industries you have worked on, it's important to have point of view perspectives on those. Like why are they growing? Why are they interesting? What's the moat? What could be risk to these industries? And within those, what are the companies or players you would pick and you feel comfortable talking about? Because that would form a large part of your interview, and it will just help you build that muscle. So if you have developed that muscle, even in cases where I give you a company or a sector which you have no idea about in an interview, you will still have that thought process of how do you talk about it, how you talk about the market opportunity, how do you talk about companies positioning, what are their strengths and what are the risks. So at least it helps you with that, building that muscle. And I think preparation for that is, if you're from consulting, okay, the case studies help a lot. At least it helps you give some perspective there. And even if you're finance background, you can refer to like CIC, Case Interviews Cracked, all those books, and you can get build that muscle there. And what additionally helps is like reading news, reading ET business, more about like just being updated so that you know what's happening in the industry. I think that really plays a big part on your commercial side. And on the finance side of things, I think what basic hygiene is definitely what Divyansh mentioned, that how do three statements link to each other, how do numbers talk. That is like the basic hygiene which you'll have to develop if you want to work in this industry.
Can you also talk more about your financial modeling round and what exactly was asked? What did you prepare?
Yeah, so in financial modeling round, basically you are given they choose any public company.
Yeah.
You are given the annual statements, their investment presentations, and some equity research reports. And say it's a and you're given like 3 to 4 hours. Within those 4 hours, at the end of those 4 hours, the output that is expected is twofold. One is the financial model, and financial model is basically you'll have historical financials. So you project like how the revenue will grow, how the EBITDA or profits will grow of the company. And it's not just a revenue projection simple. You actually have to think through what are the elements that go into building this revenue. So revenue build up, how do you think of cost build up, and eventually some other aspects like, okay, your what will happen to cash, what will happen to balance sheet items, what will happen to cash, what will happen in how much cash you will generate, all of that. But basically large part of it would be how do you think of revenue build up, how do you think of that EBITDA growth, and what are the factors that go behind it. And then based on that, you'll also have to calculate returns as in the financial model round. It's just not just projecting, but like what is the end output that you're getting to, which is your financial return. Say you invest say you buy X% stake at this valuation. What are the some exit assumptions you take, that you exit after 5 years at this valuation? So how much return you are making, 2x, 3x, or some IRR percentage. So that is something you have to calculate. So that's one part of it. And the other part of it is then the commercial aspects I mentioned, that what is your investment thesis, what could go wrong, and within the investment thesis, why this company, and all of whatever and I think what people miss out on is whatever you're talking about in investment thesis, it has to talk to your financial model, because you have taken certain assumptions in how it is growing. So those two are not independent pieces but very closely related. So it's basically the output is expected, that financial model, those 3 statements, and the returns bridge. And the second thing is that you have to make a 4-5 page PPT where you have to lay out why is this an interesting opportunity, why this company, and lay out what could be the potential value creation levers. Value creation levers, as I think he talked a lot about it, like how do you grow, maybe you enter different markets, what are your value creation levers. And the last is, if you were to diligence this asset, what are the key pieces of information or key pieces that you would want to diligence on. So you have to present all of that in say half an hour, and then there's Q&A on that.
Got it. Any specific resources you guys can recommend for people who are preparing for their interviews? What should they watch or what should they use?
I think, so again, breaking it down in 2 parts, I think for commercial, if someone's coming from a consulting background, I think they do have a good starting point. But if they're not, then if they're from finance background, I think it would be helpful to refer to some case study interview books. You don't have to go in as depth as consulting, because that's a different role profile, but just building that muscle on how do you structure problems helps. And then whatever, I would say, that's one part of work. But the second is whatever industries you have worked on. I think it's very important that you go deep into that. And say if you're working in investment bank, you already have access to research reports, analyst research reports. So that is your edge in a way, if you can access all of that and read through those materials of how they are framing it. I think reading those analyst research reports really help in thinking of your investment strategy or like investment thesis and risks. And third, I would say is, at least if not regularly, you don't read news regularly, during the interview process, it's important to read what's happening. So those are the three things. And on finance sides, personally, like I had done internship in corporate finance, so I think that gave me slight bit of head start. But otherwise,
which company was this?
Deutsche.
Deutsche.
Yeah, but otherwise, if you don't have any finance background, I think again like CFI Institute is there. There's mergers and acquisitions or websites. So those are really helpful.
Got it.
So and you can like those websites are as good as that. You can download sample models from there, and you can play around with those models.
Got it.
Yeah. No, I think both have largely covered it. I think at Kedaara it's more similar to what you described at Apax, because we typically don't have cases when we interview or when even I was interviewed. I think the stress is more on what you've done in your past and can you sort of really understand that. So it's more about rigor and curiosity. And when I say curiosity is because let's say I worked in consulting, right? And in consulting the cases you have is one part of something, and then your module is also one part of that, right? You have cement company. Our case was logistics cost optimization of cement, and I was doing let's say inbound logistics in that. If someone asks me what's your view on cement industry, I have not done that as part of that case. So you have to be curious enough to really understand that industry as a whole. So for me, a lot of my prep was if I worked in one or two industries in more detail and I want to talk about those in my interviews, then really understanding what's happening in that industry, what are the industry drivers, revenue drivers, cross drivers, etc., and pick maybe one or two companies that I really like that I can talk about in my interviews. And also a bit about valuations. Let's say if you have to invest in a company, never say DCF. To advice of anyone who's out there in a private equity interview, never say DCF. So one person in our fund used to say if someone says DCF, that person is rejected right now. Because in your classes you hear a lot about DCF, but in private equity I have never built a DCF model. I don't know if you guys have in your
I have not built either.
Yeah. I've built one, but I mean, depends on not a traditional sense, but if
you would have done leverage and all. Yeah.
No, so different industries. One
If
specific industry I did you'd have to build a DCF model as well. But traditionally, like the sectors we mostly invested in, none of them required a DCF model.
So it's more about multiples, and I think most private equity funds in India work based on multiples. So if you have an understanding of, let's say in this industry, this is the multiple that you use. Let's say you're covering financial services, then you need to know price to book is the multiple to use, and what's the right range of price to book that you would give to that company. What are the multiples that public companies trade at, and all of this more for people who come from finance background. I think that's really expected out of them, that they would know. People who are in investment banking, they should know this in and out. If you're coming from a consulting background, even if you know it's a good to have, not a must have. It'll just add brownie points to you. If you're coming from a consulting background, what's really tested is your thinking. Your depth of, you said I worked on this case and this was the impact I had. You can throw large numbers, I increased profits by 2x, 3x, whatever. But what did you really do? What were the challenges that came up in that situation? Did you have any client interaction, any tough situations that you handled? That is more important versus saying I improved the EBITDA margin by 200 bips, right? Those are the things which are not important. What is important, you actually did. And can you understand the industry? If someone were to say, is this an attractive sector? What could be the risks, like, Aman said, or what are the positive side in that sector? I think understanding that is more important. And I think the biggest thing, like Divyansh said earlier, whether, when we recently concluded a round of interviews, there was one guy who was really, really good, right? But you felt, he's not a guy you can work with, right? He's very sharp elbows, more I than we. you would not want to work with him in a team. There's a term in MBA. It's called RG. I don't know how many of you understand
Relative
it.
grading.
Yeah.
What is that? Sorry.
I don't think it's we can chat offline. But you don't want to work with those kind of people who are just about me versus us as a team.
Right.
So I think some of those softer aspects also, like you said, EQ. Like I think IQ will only get you to a certain point. Beyond that, it's all EQ. So like Divya said, I think that's really really important.
That's a very good.
I think the best part, what he said is most important, is what I think is something you have to put extra effort in, is knowing your CV very well and knowing in and out, because everything that's written in your CV will come back and bite you. You don't know how.
Yeah.
So the point where he said that he was working on one aspect of a cement company, I mean, his role in 3 months of that case, let's say, would have never required him to go look at the financials of that cement company. But that's what's gonna test you, because then they might just ask him what are the other companies in this space, so how are they valued at, what's the differentiator. Your role did not require you to do that, but it's like he said that curiosity and rigor. So it's basically those are the two things that your job did not require you, but to get the next job you really need that.
I think
And
those
it's
are
very
the
important.
differentiators. Those are the differentiators. Everyone would know their cases, what they worked.
Yeah.
But do you have that thing of going beyond? If I have to, if I'm getting into a private equity job, I'm doing investing. And if you are, say, I knew for 2 years I wanted to do investing. If you knew that, then when you were doing your case, did you think कि मैं इस company में invest करूँगा या नहीं करूँगा?
Yeah.
So that will
Very
really
good
test
point.
you.
I agree. And इसमें फिर like for someone like who is just getting into PE, like all these interviews which are there, did you also like refer to any resources as such which helped you crack your PE interviews, or
So
how was
when
it
I
for you?
was doing my private equity interviews, I was on campus at
Yeah.
IMA, right? So 2-3 things I refer to. One was, let's say I was preparing a certain sector. For me, that was, let's say, cement. Then reading through research reports, because IMA, we had a Bloomberg terminal, we could access research reports. So, reading through the analyst research reports, referring to my past cases, etc., etc. I think that was one important part. Second, because, I was doing MBA, I have finance courses. So going through that in, very detail, what is FCFF, what is FCFE, if something changes in account statement, what happens to the other thing. I think that was very, very important. The third thing, and then I was very fortunate, there was a course in my college at that point of time called Applied Value Investing. There's a guy from Nalanda Capital, which is a very, very reputed, public market firm, N.C. Shadri, who used to take that course. And, that course was about public markets, but the framework was very, very similar to how we also, industry, company, management, valuations, risks, etc. And the framework is pretty standard, right? So that actually, I think, helped me a lot, because I went through that framework and, applied to some of the things that I was talking about. I think those are the 3 resources that I relied on, when I was preparing.
Adding to that, but you can also expect like questions like, if I give you $100 million today, where would you invest? So be prepared for those questions as well.
Yeah, and I think related to that, some people ask, do you invest in public markets?
Yeah.
What do you do with your, how it will start is what do you do with your money? Right? You will be in some job earning a lot.
Yeah.
If you say mutual funds, then, why, if you are into investing, why not, explore stocks?
Yeah.
If you say stocks, then which stock did you invest in? You can't just say random numbers, because what price did you enter at?
Yeah.
What price is it now? How is the company done? Those kind of questions will come.
Right.
Yeah, I think the 101 is to basically have 2-3 stocks that you want. This is a very common question.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
every 10 interviews, you'll be asked
Yeah.
once
Yeah.
at least this, and then you have to defend why. There, the
Right.
thesis and risks
Yeah.
and your control over valuations has to be very clear.
Yeah.
Right. So these questions, like if I were to give you $100 million, where would you invest? मतलब इसके answers, like how do you guys give usually?
I think the way to think about it is to talk about industries and spaces you typically know, and not give like ideological answers, but actually give tangible answers. This industry, this company. And it's better if you draw it from your prep work, from your experiences, from the industries you have worked on, because you'll be able to talk through more about it. Or it could be the stocks that you invested. Maybe you invested like 5,000 rupees today, wish you had 100 million, you would have invested in those. So I think it has to come from your experience. Either it could be investing, either could be your work, and it has to be a tangible answer with a name and with the industry and a stock.
Yeah,
Got it.
you can't say like, I'll invest in GenAI because it's the hottest thing right now. But if you say that, you have to really read up about
Right.
it and, know why you are saying that. or if you feel that your industry that you worked in is not very attractive, it kaun karega isme
Yeah.
invest. You can say, while this is an industry I've prepared on, I don't believe it's a right time to invest, but if I were to talk about this, I can talk about this. I feel this is a good industry to invest, but I haven't prepared as much on it. I know high level themes, so you should be calibrated with whatever you say, qualify as much as you can so that you don't trip up on some
Yeah.
of these.
Makes sense.
I think one thing is very clear. I think no need to fake it. They'll easily catch you. It's
Yeah.
okay to. It's always okay to not have answers or not know something, and okay, you can always say, okay, that's something I should have known about. I'll go and read about it. That's a good thing you pointed, but don't try to fake it because they'll catch it, and that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, of course, I agree. And Karthik, for you, how many rounds were there at Kedaara?
So similar. Mine were, few were on call and few were in person. So I had flown down to Bombay for a day. I think I had some 7-8 rounds that day. Similar. Everyone sort of mid to senior in the fund would want to meet with you. So yeah, it was similar like that.
Got it. And again, 30, 45, 1 hour.
45 minutes to an hour. Yeah.
Got it. Fair. Cool. And also, for someone who's also preparing for interviews, from your perspective, from an interviewer's perspective, also an interview's perspective, if they are asked about how do you evaluate a company, so how should they answer? What are some of the parameters they should check? And since you guys are doing that work day in and day out, what would you recommend them if they are asked questions like evaluate this business opportunity? So, क्या parameters check करोगे?
Yeah, I think I would talk about the structure first, how can you structure your answer, and then within that parameters would vary depending upon which industry you're evaluating. But I think the first thing would be market. Is it an attractive enough market? And that would be typically how the industry is growing, and then within that, and when you look at each of these factors, you just not have to think about what's going well, but what could go wrong as well. So first you analyze the market opportunity, is the industry attractive, if there are tailwinds, what is driving that growth, what could be the risks to this industry, is there any existential threat? For example, in tech services you could talk about Gen AI, which people are talking about could be a threat. So you need to first form a view on the market, look at these parameters, then you come to the asset that you're looking at, and that asset, basically the company you're evaluating, you would see how well it is positioned in the industry. So the way you determine the positioning of the industry, it could be you look at their market share, it could be more qualitative aspects of why they win, why they lose. In industries where your customers are more concentrated, for say IT services firms, there you can actually speak to those customers and get sense on why do they win, why do they lose, how satisfied their customers are with them. So you look at the company's positioning, and here you have to figure out why are they differentiated, why this particular company. You could come to an answer that there are 5 good companies, all of them are equally well, this is a space I want to grow, and this is the bet I'm getting today on the table. That could be a view you take, but you need to be very clear on why this company. And then once you have done that, then there are other aspects to how you think of your investment thesis. Then you have to think of, okay, you invest in this company, but what are your drivers of value, or what additionally you can do over your whole period of 5 years to increase, to grow the company exponentially more than it would grow on its natural trajectory. So is M&A a lever? Is entering a new geography a lever? So you think of the value creation levers, and also I think it's a good lens to apply when you are actually investing in a company. If you also apply a lens that tomorrow I'll have to exit that company down the road, what could be the potential exit options for you? Because it could be that maybe you are investing in a company which is too large, and when you are about to sell, it's just nobody who can buy that sort of company. So this is a typical way you structure it, and each of these, whenever you think, okay, what is good, you also think what can go wrong, so that you can think of mitigants for what are the risks.
If you learned something new from this video, do share it with your friends and subscribe to this channel so that we can bring you the best content possible. Also, if you want to watch this entire episode, click on the link in the description box and you can go to Kushal Lodha YouTube channel and watch the entire podcast episode. Thank you so much for watching this and have an amazing day.